Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning to you. Yeah. Good morning, good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, Lady Stephanie. Good morning, Lady Barbara. Good morning to those of you who all are watching through YouTube live stream. Good morning, Lady Ravonda. So glad to have you all on this morning. And those of you all who will continue to make your way in today. And good morning to the We Dare Squad. I want to thank you. You all make it possible to keep this broadcast going. You all make our giveaways possible. So I am very, very thankful to you all. If you would like to participate in the We Dare Squad and being a sponsor, I've been trying to get our shirts completed. Finding the right vendor has been trying, let's just say that. But we will have shirts available, Lord willing, before the end of this year is out. So if you want to be a part of the We Dare Squad, this would be a good time to join. You can email me at reachshantae@gmail.com. That's SHANTAESHANTAE to find out more about how you can become a part of the We Dare Squad. So today is Teachable Tuesday. If you're with us for the first time, this is Daring Dialogues, and we cover a different subject matter every single day of the week. So Monday is motivation, Tuesday is history, mainly Black history. So anybody is welcome to check out our Tuesday broadcast. You don't have to be Black to be interested in Black history. Wednesday is relationships. Thursday is theology and philosophy. And Friday is finance and health, which we call Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Fridays. So, whatever your subject matter that you are interested in, you can pick a day of the week and join us once a week, or you can join us every single day, Monday through Friday. Good morning, Lady Evelyn. So, I do want to also give you a couple of announcements. Labor Day, we are going to be participating in our evening of worship and prayer. We're still trying to decide whether or not we're going to live stream, whether we'll be able to live stream. But if we're not able to live stream, we are going to record the ministry for that evening, and then we will maybe put it out at another time. But we're still trying to figure out if the spot we're in is able to receive live streaming there because it's outdoors event that we are putting on. If you're interested in attending, it is absolutely free to the public. It is completely citizen sponsored. It is a nonpartisan event. We are simply coming together to worship the Lord and pray and seek God for our nation and a positive uh, direction for our nation to go in. We are going to have some refreshments there as well. It's an evening event from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Being held in Warrenton, Virginia. So if you again want more information on that, you can email me at reachshante@gmail.com. All you have to do, we will have some chairs there, but we are asking if you want to bring your own chair, you can bring your own chair. You want to bring a blanket, you can bring a blanket. It is a family friendly event. All right. Um, what else? Oh, the rest of this week, I'm going to be traveling. And so I know tomorrow specifically, Daring Dialogues, I'm going to hold it in the evening. I'm going to try to do it between 5, somewhere between 5 and 6. 5 and 6 p.m. I'm going to try to come on. If I have a change of time or if I decide to cancel it altogether on Wednesday, I will let you know. But for right now, I do know that it's going to be, we're going to do an evening edition on tomorrow. So don't look for me at 11 a.m. because I will be on the road, probably driving, and therefore I won't be able to do the broadcast in the morning. All right, I think that is all my announcements that I need to make sure that I say. Yes. Okay. So today we are back in a Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask by Dr. Claude Anderson. This is an excellent resource if you are homeschooling, especially if you're homeschooling middle and high schoolers, and you're looking for curriculum, history curriculum, especially history curriculum that covers things that your normal whitewashed public school textbooks are not going to cover, that your child especially needs to know, whether your child is black, white, or Latino. All right, this is an excellent addition to your curriculum. All right, just want to put that plug in there for the homeschoolers. And we are in the section called Historical Ironies. Good morning, love. There's only one man that I call love on here, guys. Okay, it's my husband. Rock Studios down there. The guy with the blue and bluish purplish icon. Yep. Mwah. All right, back to the broadcast. Sorry about that. We are in historical ironies, and question 25 is, what is the doctrine of unequal exchange, and is it still being applied to the black race? What is the doctrine of unequal exchange, and is it still being applied to the black race or black people? Notice the term there, doctrine. Remember, the scripture talks about how you have to deal with and cast down, right, and dismantle doctrines of devils. A lot of what we see happening in our country, but not just our country, but since we're in the United States, that's the country we're talking about. A lot of what we see that has been directed towards the disenfranchisement of black people has to do with doctrines of devils. What are doctrines of devils? It is evil teachings, evil policies that have been enacted by human beings to keep certain groups down or to keep a person ignorant. All of that would be considered doctrines of devils. So when you hear the term doctrine, or when you hear the term policy, or when you hear the term teaching, and you realize that what has been enacted is actually unjust or evil, I want you to begin to relate that back to what the scripture warns us about in terms of doctrines of devils. So this one is called the doctrine of unequal exchange. It is the practice of unbalanced socioeconomic trade in which weaker parties foolishly trade or are tricked into trading their valuable goods, services, or properties for money or items of far less value than what the weaker party is trading. Now, this not only happens historically, but believe it or not, this happens in business a lot of times when people want to trade goods and services, and when you're offering something much more valuable than what someone is willing to trade you for, that's an unequal exchange. What they're doing, what some of these nations are trying to do with Africa, with the trade deals, right? Africa is sitting on oil and gold and diamonds and cobalt, right? And some of the specific elements used in making cell phones and new technology. Africa, parts of Africa is sitting on these resources, and you have other countries that are wanting to come in and make trade deals with Africa, saying, "Well, we'll give you food, or we'll give you some medical help or healthcare things for your country in exchange for all of your minerals," right? That's an unequal exchange. The United States paying Ghana $20 million, $20 million to take over their ports and build military bases and things there, for the United States to have future occupation in Africa for all of the wars that are coming, that are coming, that are coming according to scripture. They only paid Ghana $20 million. That's robbery. That's an unequal exchange. But the leader of Ghana fell for it. So there are people in Ghana who are upset about that deal that they made with the United States, and they have every right to be upset because that was an unequal exchange. All right? And so that's what this doctrine is about. Frequently, the weaker exploited parties receive diminished monetary value or only intangible or symbolic benefits. The exploiting party receives excessive value, thereby creating a balance of trade in favor of the exploiting party. So the doctrine of unequal exchange can be seen around the world, not just in the United States. The lack of reciprocity or equality of trade creates unbalanced socioeconomic outcomes between the exploiter and the exploited. The concept of unequal exchange as an economic strategy was evolving in the entire European continent as it was suffering catastrophic conditions. Europe had been in a prolonged period of suffering itself from famine, diseases, crime, and dire poverty. Traders and explorers were in search of resources in New World markets. They maximized their economic advantage when they engaged classical African societies. The untapped black human gold in Africa, or the human resources, or the bodies of all these people that were black and beautiful and undiseased and healthy and strong, that could do the work to rebuild European societies that have been busted, broke, and disgusted around the world. They call them human gold. Scientists have uh, realized that there's more to that term than just their bodies, right? It's not just black human gold in terms of human resources, it's also black gold in terms of melanin, or the chemical inside that causes your skin to become this color, that gives you certain benefits that people who are less melanated don't have. And in case you didn't know, I'm going to say it again for those of you who may be new. Melanin is worth more on the stock market exchange than gold. So, don't be duped into thinking that black has no value, because the people who run the stock exchange know that blackness has value. They know that melanin has value. They're trying to scientifically engineer melanin so that people who are non-melanated can actually take what you get in your skin naturally. All right? I'll say that one more time for the investors in case you haven't figured out what you probably should be investing in. Hint, hint. Good morning, Lady Apostle. Melanin, which is naturally produced in the bodies of black people, is worth more than gold on the stock exchange. Don't believe me? Go look it up. All right? So the untapped black human gold in Africa and an abundance of free land with minerals in the Americas became high priorities. How on earth does this human biology get on any market? Ridiculous. Well, you have organ selling, you have experimentation, you have them trying to extract melanin from humans. Hence the disappearance of thousands of black boys and girls every year in the United States. Nobody knows where these children are. They just disappeared. But let one white child disappear. Hello, Molly Tibbetts. Molly Tibbetts, one white girl disappeared, and we heard about her for several weeks. Black children in America are disappearing every single day by the thousands. There's no APB put out on them. That's a whole other periscope. Let me move on. The untapped black human gold in Africa and an abundance of free land with minerals in the Americas became high priorities in resuscitating the European nations with wealth and power. European slave traders could purchase black human beings in Africa for trinkets, but made huge profits, typically 1,500% profit, when they resold them as slaves in America. The slave trade and the doctrine of unequal exchange created a balance of trade in favor of European countries, the exploiting parties. It infused capital into European nations and gave them massive wealth. The African continent, with its various tribes, had not yet been divided into different nations but at this time by European powers. The entire African continent became an exploited party in an exchange in which human and mineral resources were being traded for cheap trinkets, colored cloth. Humans were traded for Bibles and valueless symbols. She says, "Wow, I didn't know this." Yes, that's why we have Teachable Tuesday every week. The historical consequence of the practice of the doctrine of unequal exchange left the African continent and its black population exploited, impoverished, and powerless even today in the 21st century. So I always say to people, and I'm really not trying to be funny about this, but I always say to people, if you're going to talk about the ghetto, if you're going to talk about the what's happening in American ghettos, if you're going to talk about what's happening in the hood, if you're going to talk about black people who live in ghetto conditions, because I grew up in the ghetto, you can't just stop there. You can't just start your conversation with the people who were born in the ghetto. You have to start your conversation with who created the ghettos and why. How did we get to these pockets of impoverished black people all over the nation? And who better to help you understand that than someone who lived and came and was born in the ghetto? All right? So, how did we get that? We got it because of things like redlining, where they said that we don't want those Negroes staying and living anywhere near us, but we know they have to live somewhere. We had 4 million people who were released during slavery. 4 million, around 4 million people. So what are we going to do with these 4 million people that we no longer have a use for because we can't use them for free? We can't use them for free anymore. So what are we going to do with them? So some of them wound up going back to the plantation because you got released, but you got released with no food, no clothes, no shelter, no land, no mule. So basically you were released to die, in essence. So some of them decided to go travel. Some of them wound up on abandoned pieces of land. Some of them wound up in the north. Some of them remained in the south and wound up working as sharecroppers on their master's land, making pennies. And then they got caught in the cycle of sharecropping, which is they were supposed to be working to earn to be released from sharecropping, but they never got released because by the time the sharecropper got through nickeling and diming them for what they supposedly owed in tools and materials and all that to till the land, because we were agricultural people, so we knew how to do that. By the time they got done saying, okay, here's your money, but you owe me for the tools, and you owe me for the seeds, and you owe me for Johnny's shoes, and you owe me for your pair of slacks. So by the time they got done taking back from them after they supposedly paid them, they were in the hole. Sounds like predatory lending in black neighborhoods still today. Same process. All right. So you have people who have been continuously, consistently exploited. And then you have people saying, we don't want them around us. So here are some pieces of land. As a matter of fact, they put black people in the poorest parts of the land or the least fertile parts of the land. And black people still rose and grew things and made it successful amongst themselves. Greenwood, Tulsa, Oklahoma. So even as they were sectioned off and expected to just starve to death and die off, black people continued to make something out of the nothing that they were given. And then the white people said, well, let's go over here and see how these Negroes are doing. And they went over there and checked on them and saw that wait a minute, they're prospering. They're doing better than us. Then jealousy set in, and then destruction happened. Hence, Black Wall Street and Seneca Falls, where Central Park sits, and Rosewood, Florida. So when people look at today and they're saying, I don't understand why these black people are the way they are, or I don't understand why are they like this in the ghetto, and I don't understand this and I don't understand that, I'm going to need you to go back to the source of it. How did they get to this place? How were they sectioned off? What resources were they denied? And when that happens consistently, generation after generation after generation after generation, then you blame the people that are born into it rather than looking at the people that created the system in the first place. That's what I have a problem with. Not that we should not hold people accountable, but if we're going to hold people accountable, we need to hold everybody accountable. The people who formed the ghetto, they're getting by. No one's saying anything about it. Nobody's calling our government really into account as to how these ghettos were created. I don't see people calling the lending institutions into account, and the banking institutions and the realtor companies. All of them played a part in what we see right now. It did not just drop down out of nowhere. It was a system, and there were parties that were involved in creating that system. Back to the lesson. After Columbus's so-called discovery of the Americas, European nations began to realize that their socioeconomic salvation, how were they going to survive? They found their salvation. Europeans found their salvation in the commercial enslavement of African black people. They found their salvation in human trafficking. Now, a little homework for you. Go to Ezekiel 28 and read it, and you'll find out who started human trafficking in the first place. It's in there. Trafficking is not of God. They could see that not only were there enormous profits to be reaped from the slave trade itself, but huge profits could also be realized from owning and processing the slave made material goods. So not only am I getting a benefit off free human labor, but now I'm also getting a double benefit off of whatever those humans produce. Because they're not getting credit for it, I'm going to get credit for it. Europe was poised for slavery to become the cornerstone for worldwide socioeconomic development. And we keep wondering why our markets will crash. Could it be they keep crashing because of blood money? Could it be that they keep crashing because of ill-gotten gain? Could it be that they keep crashing because we have yet to rectify how those funds were made to begin with, and not just the United States, but all of the other countries that participated in the slave trade? The whole market is based off of human trafficking. I'm just saying. A massive number of trading companies emerged with the intent of trading with African native chiefs who would sell members of their own tribes. There was recently an article that came out, I think from the New Yorker or Atlantic, one of them, about a woman who wrote about her Nigerian relative or grandfather who was or great grandfather, something like that, who was a slave trader. Yes, there were Africans who were involved in the slave trade. Many of those Africans, however, say that they never imagined what was happening with those slaves. Some of them just assumed that the slavery would be much like what it was in Africa, which was indentured servitude. That they were selling a person, this person would be utilized for, 5 years, 7 years, and then let go. But American slave trade took it to a whole other level. They wanted enslavement of people into perpetuity. Do you know what perpetuity is? That means I'm going to enslave you, I'm going to enslave your child, I'm going to enslave their child, and I'm just going to keep on enslaving everything that came out of your womb. That's what America did. By the way, that was not happening in other countries. That was specific to America. Chattel slavery, where they would take the slaves and breed the best of the slaves. They were doing science, they were doing biological engineering, the early stages of it, because they were breeding the best and the strongest slaves with the best and the strongest slaves. Oh, that was specific to the United States of America. So when people try to compare what happened here with what happened around the world, people need to understand that there is a difference as to what was going on in the United States that was not going on in other countries. That was not happening in Haiti. We talked about that last time. The reason why the Haitian revolt was successful in many ways was because they were bringing older slaves over to Haiti, and slaves who were military trained and military minded. That was not the case in the United States. United States, they were bringing mainly young children and women over. They started with men, and then they started bringing young women and children over to breed with the male slaves they already had over here. So, African chiefs or tribal potentates who unwillingly engaged in providing the human capital for slave trading were ignorant of the long-range consequences of their acts. They did not foresee the system of physical and psychological exploitation that the European countries were creating around a sense of white communal solidarity and systematic debasement of black people. All you have to do is Google black injustice around the world. You will see Some of the same issues that we're having in the United States with black people are the same issues that the Brazilians are having, the African Brazilians, are the same issues that the black Aboriginal people in Australia are having, are the same issues that the black people in the UK are having, are the same issues that the black people in South Africa are having. Why is this possible and why is this true? Because there was a European white communal solidarity and systematic debasement of black people around the world based out of this system and the history of the slave trade. They got, as one person said, they are on code worldwide. This is a worldwide system that has to be eradicated. And when something is that deeply entrenched on a worldwide scale, you're going to need more than your protest sign to dismantle it. Can I say that again? I think I'm going to say that again. When something is embedded in a society on a worldwide scale, you're going to need more than your protest sign to dismantle it. You're going to need the power of the Most High God to dismantle it. So, black slavery became indispensable and was incorporated into all facets of emerging economies around the world. Religious organizations, and this again becomes a part of the barrier to people recognizing that it's going to take the Most High to dismantle this, because you had people establishing this in the name of God. Religious organizations conjured up. I want to make sure that's clear, because it's not theologically justified. They conjured up theological justification for slavery. Slave traders loaded their boats with Bibles, religious artifacts, cheap consumer goods, and old guns, and traded them to Africans for slaves, natural resources, and their mineral assets. Records indicate that the worth of one African slave far exceeded the useless items that slave traders were dumping into African and other international markets. Trade expeditions started out looking for strong black slaves called black gold. Now, how did they go from being called black gold to all of these other terms that we hear? Initially, they knew what they were. They called them black gold. Have you heard a rap song yet called Black Gold? I'm still waiting on it. Anybody? Anybody know? Anybody know a rapper named Black Gold? All right. Black Gold. I've heard of Black and Yellow. I haven't heard Black Gold yet. I haven't heard a song about Black Gold. But they were called Black Gold. And it soon expanded to include natural and mineral resources. The massive displacement of human capital and natural resources weakened the ability of black Africans to become self-sufficient and to profit from the economic development of their own African continent. And we see even now, generations later, that some of the African leaders are saying, listen, we have got to get some of this European interest out of our continent, period. We have to get them out of our negotiations, period. Why do they feel that way? It's not just an emotion. It is the fact that they have yet to profit from their own continent. Everyone else is profiting still from Africa. Hello, China. China is recolonizing parts of Africa at right now as we speak. So some of the leaders in different countries on the continent of Africa are saying, no, we have got to stop this. We have got to have our own negotiations. We've got to have our own deals. We have to have our own partnerships. Hello, Ethiopia and Eritrea said, we got this. We'll handle this. They have made peace. They have taken away restrictions from travel. People who were separated from their family are being united after decades with their family members. Because guess what? Without other people's influence and interference, they had a peaceful reconciliation that did not require not one gun, not one bomb, not one drone. This is possible. In 1886, the European nations met in Germany. Many people do not realize that when you look at the boundary separations in Africa, many people don't realize that those boundaries, for the most part, were not set by Africans. European nations met in Germany. They put a map of the African continent on the table, and they divided Africa up between themselves, with each European nation selecting a region of Africa that they were going to colonize and take control of the people and natural resources. So you want to talk about collusion? This was worldwide collusion. All of the European nations got together, put down a map of Africa and said, okay, Germany, you can take this part of Africa. French, you can take this part of Africa. Europe, you can take this part of Africa. And Germany, I won't bother what you're doing over here to the Africans if you won't bother what I'm doing over here to the Africans. All right? This is historical fact. So, they decided amongst themselves how they were going to divide up and split up Africa to rape its resources. This gang rape of the world's richest continent further divided and crippled the black population. They were forced to accept European cultures and languages that were imposed upon them by their conquerors. With each unequal exchange transaction, the countries of Africa grew weaker and more dependent. So this was happening right around 1886. Slave trade has been going on, but now they're saying we don't just want bodies, we want land, and we want mineral resources, and we want occupation on the ground. All right. Here's one of the images from the U.S. Library of Congress. This is an image of white traders and slave hunters exploiting African blacks. All right. Because some people were documenting this. Okay. In the 1960s, as the world watched the televised Black civil rights movement in America, the European nations ceremoniously officially released their rule over African colonies. So I want you to think about that. As Black people, some indigenous to the Americas, some brought over from Africa, as we are fighting for our rights in America in the 60s, all of a sudden, the European nations get prompted to officially release their rule over their African colonies. How powerful is that? So yes, Some people from Africa still come over here and act in a very disparaging manner towards Black Americans, but please understand that your liberation from colonization also came because Black Americans were over here marching for their civil rights. I hope they're teaching you that on the continent. However, they installed local African blacks in high public offices to be political figureheads, while cutting the colonial ties gave the appearance that all power and independence had been turned over to Africans. European whites retained ownership of and exploited the continent's massive natural and mineral wealth from behind the scenes. As Asian countries grew stronger economically, they aggressively joined in the rush to control some part of African wealth, and we see that even to this day. The destruction from the unequal exchange has been cumulative. Once the pattern became entrenched that Black African nations accepted symbolic payment for their valuable human and natural resources, it was not possible to reverse the effects. Impoverished Black African nations are still forced to surrender their massive natural resources to the world, and in return are granted what is called welfare loans from the World Bank and the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, which they are unable to repay because of the interest rates on these loans. Clearly, the continuous pattern of unequal exchange has had permanent consequences on Africa. The doctrine of unequal exchange effectively invigorated Europe and engorged its nations with the wealth of Africa. European nations then introduced the doctrine of unequal exchange further into America. In order for the incoming population of poor whites to settle and control this nation, this new nation, two elements were readily needed. They needed free land and free labor. The native Indians possessed all the land, and the black slaves would become the free labor. European whites had no intentions of paying for either one of these. With native Indians, Europeans simply replicated the same techniques and trading model the slave traders had successfully already used in Africa. Whites colonizing America met with various native Indian chiefs and offered friendship, Christianity, their version, Bibles, trinkets, clothing, and housing in exchange for the right to take the title to 1 billion acres of land with its minerals and natural resources. The unequal exchange left native Indians nearly depopulated, poverty stricken, with no land to support themselves. Hence, my ancestors, many of them, have been relegated to reservations. The negative effects of the unequal exchange were cumulative also for native Indians. White immigrants became wealthy from the land and resources they gained from the native Indians, who became weakened and dependent upon them. While native Indians never totally recovered the loss of their physical country, they were put into a protected class, and the tribes have been able to reclaim some of their economic losses and to restore some independence because they were allowed their sovereignty. The nations, the Indian nations in the United States, are considered sovereign, just in case you didn't know that. After emancipation, the unequal exchange continued to define the operational relationship between blacks and whites into the 21st century. It has become an accepted relationship that is rarely questioned and is practiced openly. Whites take what is valuable from blacks in exchange still for symbolism and trinkets. Black people have not yet broken free from resultant weakness, and whites expect that the uninterrupted practice of unequal exchange gives them the permission to continue it. After 360 years of this practice, black people in America has been successfully marginalized in many ways. They have remained an economically non-competitive people throughout the centuries. The practice is so embedded it is rarely recognized. However, the following are descriptive of this phenomenon. So he's going to give you 6 ways that black people have not recovered from this doctrine or from this system of unequal exchange. All right. Number 1, and this is true, although I wish it wasn't, it's true. Black people give nearly 100% of their vote to the Democratic Party, even when they are promised nothing. Receive photo ops, yet remain loyal to the party no matter what happens to them. What is he saying? He's saying even if you don't go to the other extreme of becoming a Republican, at some point you have to start looking at your candidates, regardless of what their party affiliation is, and you have to demand more of your candidates. Florida is voting today. Please, Florida, get out and vote. You have to demand something of your candidates. So many in the Democratic Party feel like black people have always voted Democratic, so why do I need to do anything different? Why do I need to promise black people something? Because many of those candidates feel they already have your vote down, because black people traditionally, since the 60s, have voted Democratic. And as evangelist prophet Stephanie said, use your moral compass. And not just use your moral compass, but get out there and question your candidates and ask questions specific to your community. What do you plan to do about black unemployment rates, which are twice as high as any other group in this country? If white people's unemployment rates was at the rate of black people's right now, this country would probably be under martial law. Because they would be rioting. Our unemployment rate is still unacceptable. People say it's gone down. Yes, it's gone down, but in comparison to what? The black unemployment rate is still close to 7%. The white unemployment rate right now is running a little above 3%. Just do the math. There's only 42 million black people in this country, and 7%, almost 7% of them are unemployed. So, politician, what do you plan to do about it in my community, in my state, in my county? What programs are you planning to institute so that we can begin to address this level of unemployment in the black community? No plan, no vote. Number 2, blacks created towns in which to live to escape terrorism. Whites either took that property or paid very little for it and built luxurious resorts or developments. Most often, those same developments they built then turned around and excluded black people from living there. Number 3, black people produce a continuous flow of music and dance forms for the whole world. Go look up, another assignment for you, go look up the origin of most of the styles of music in the world, and a black person started it. From country to rock to rap to hip hop to R&B to gospel. Yeah. White people learn how to sing it, then claim it, and then enrich themselves by copying, covering, and commercializing what black people have produced. Go look up the three owners of most of the music flowing out to the world. They own more than 90% of the music rights of the music produced going out of America. Now, go look at the faces, go look at the artists, and then go look at the owners. The artists, many of them do not own their music. This is the difference between a signed artist and an unsigned or independent artist. An independent artist, many of us, own our own music. That means we get the rights to our music. Everybody else, if you're signed to a label, 9 times out of 10, you're maybe getting 4 to 7% of your music rights. But people want to keep signing up for exploitation. So I can only tell you. Number 4, black people put their scarce dollars into the freedmen's banks for safekeeping. Remember when we did the whole reading on the history of the black dollar? The Freedmen's Bank was the first bank that freed black people put their money into for safekeeping. White people misappropriated the funds, and the black depositors received no compensation for all of that money that was stolen from them. So when you see black people saying, I don't have a bank, or I don't have a checking account, or I keep my money on me, or like grandma put it in her Bible or in her mattress, those things have history to them. In jars, in cookie tins, that kind of mentality, that kind of behavior has a history to it. Black people put their money in banks, white people stole it. They didn't get any compensation. Guess what? They don't trust banks. A lot of black people do not trust banks. Same thing with the medical field. Black people's bodies were experimented on and continue to be experimented on by the medical field for the benefit of other people. Hello, Henrietta Lacks. So when you have black people say, I don't go to doctors, I don't trust doctors, yes, that can be dangerous, because if you don't go and something's seriously wrong with you, right? Maybe it could have been cured had you known earlier, but you have a fear of going to the doctor. But you have to understand what is the root of these things? What's the root? The root is, on many levels, black people have been exploited in this country in so many ways. A friend of mine and I said, maybe we just need to get together and write a book called 1,001 Ways to Rip Black People Off. Because, come on. You got hospital issues, you have banking issues. So everybody keeps telling black Americans, well, if you just do this, you'll be all right. If you just do this, you'll be all right. If you just do this, you'll be all right. And they have seen, experience has taught them the opposite. Experience has taught our ancestors the opposite. That when I try to trust in a system that everybody else does well at or does well in, I find out that the system is built to exploit me. And that's probably one of the hardest things for black Americans to explain to other people groups that come here that are not being exploited by this same system. They're doing well. They're prospering. And our ancestors are like, great, I'd like to prosper too. Except that the system is designed to exploit me. not benefit me. So we have now had to figure out ways to create our own systems so that we don't get exploited. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. This is not made up things that happen to black people. These are actual things that happen to our ancestors. And so, because they happened to our ancestors, what happened? Our ancestors began to be programmed about some things, and they passed those lessons on to the generations. They passed those lessons on to the generations because they saw how they in their generations had been exploited by systems. So what did they do? They were trying to protect their future generations by telling them things like, listen, these banks will take your money. Have you some money set aside? Yeah, you can use a checking account, but don't put all your cash in there because if that money disappears, you might not get it back. They weren't saying things like that to their future generations. They weren't saying things like that without a reason. There was a historical basis behind it. There's a historical basis behind black people being afraid to go to doctors. There's a historical basis behind black people being afraid of water and swimming. Yes, we have generations that are breaking that, but we also have to understand that there was history behind it. Okay? Number 5. Black people own thousands of acres of land in Spanish Florida that was stolen by southern plantation owners from black settlers, and they didn't have to pay the black owners. So again, you talk about land ownership, housing, banking, all of these places where the majority of Americans hold their wealth. You have to ask the question, how did your ancestors get the land? There are a lot of white people that have hundreds of acres of land that are too afraid to ask their parents and their grandparents and their great grandparents, how did we get this land? How do we get this land? Because now if I ask, how did we get this land? Then now I'm going to be responsible for what I know. But if I never ask, I can pretend like we just worked hard and got this land. Number 6, the cervical cancer in the body of Henrietta Lacks, a poor black woman who produced cells that were immortal. Did you hear me? Henrietta Lacks produced cells that never died. Now I'm going to ask you a question. How many more black people around here are producing cells that never die? And they have not figured it out yet. Yeah, say her name. How many black people around here are producing cells that never die? Because if you think they just only figured out that Henrietta Lacks produced cells that never die, you're not thinking far enough along. So Henrietta Lacks produced cells that never die, which changed medical research for the world, produced a new medical industry for the world that generated great wealth for all the entrepreneurs that were investing in this new medical industry, biotechnology. But none of this wealth was given to this day to her family, who is still alive. And many times they wait until the family dies out to even start talking about the possibility of wealth. Same thing with Black Wall Street. They fought many years, the descendants of Black Wall Street, whose businesses were burned down, whose land was taken, all of that. The descendants of Black Wall Street fought many years to get some kind of recompense for what happened to them. I think the last relative, they were still doing legal proceedings when the last living survivor of Black Wall Street died recently. They were still in legal processes. They were still being tied up in legalities for what was rightfully theirs that should have been recompensed. But this is what America does. Sadly, her family is still going through legal battles because everybody in the world is benefiting from their relatives' sales. Companies, entrepreneurs, businesses, Wall Street itself. Everybody's benefiting, including the people whose lives are being saved by the new research. Everybody's benefiting, but not her family. And people don't see anything wrong with that. It's called the doctrine of unequal exchange. So, Black people own and control only 1/2 of 1% of anything of value in American society. That is the data. So if you want to learn how to control and own more than 1/2 of a percent, Lady Apostle, would you put your website up? She is helping people right now to become owners and controllers of their financial future. Please take a course. All right. There, at this point, when you understand how much your people group has been ripped off in this country, that alone should make you want to go start a business. That alone should make you want to go and begin to build wealth for yourself and your family. The doctrine of unequal exchange has continuously kept them drained of wealth generating resources, disposable income, culture, leadership, and material resources. Blacks frequently wonder out loud how white people are able to live in such opulence across America, own industries, businesses, skyscraper buildings, magnificent homes, manicured lawns, luxurious automobiles parked in their driveways. The answer is simple. White people acquired what is called base assets, free land, and free labor. They had an economic base that was not given to your ancestors. This is why there's a 220-year wealth gap, meaning it will take our children 220 years to just catch up to where white people are in wealth right now. Through the doctrine of unequal exchange, and then practice group economics. They practice group economics to keep 100% of their disposable income and wealth within their own people group. Many white people practice group economics. And it's not hard to practice group economics when your base assets of free land and free labor have been given to you. All right? So, what does that mean? That means anytime I say you need to buy black, you need to support black businesses, black movies, black authors, black product makers, black grocery stores, black restaurants, anytime black people say you need to buy and support black, there's at least, I can guarantee you, there's at least one white person that comes on my page saying, why are you saying that? This is racist. Never fails. But they don't understand. They already practice that amongst themselves. Okay? They already practice that. That's why they're able to keep and retain 100% of their income and wealth. They already practice that. All right? They're already, in other words, they're already serving their own people group. They're already producing products for their own people group. Asians, they already practice that. They already produce products and services and goods for their own people group. The Latina community, they already practice that. They already produce products and services and goods for their own people group. And guess what? Nobody gets upset about it. People actually admire the fact that they produce goods and services and products for their own community. But when black people do it, people get upset and think that we have declared war on the world. Why? The reason they get upset is because, according to the world's mentality, black people are supposed to be the goods, the products, the services, and the consumers of everybody else's products. That's why. It's a world mentality that still has not gone anywhere. So, even when people don't realize they're doing it, that's what they're doing. You're actually upset because I'm choosing to not be the product. I'm choosing to create product. That when you say that, that's what you're saying to my community. Why do you guys have to go upset the apple cart? We want you all to be the consumers, and we want to be the producers. Now, we can't have a whole bunch of you all going out and being producers because our economy depends on you remaining a consumer. So, yes, we understand that you consume over $1 trillion now in product. So you are on the other side of the counter giving to us. And we want you to stay over there because that's good for us, for you to stay over on the other side of the counter to be the consumer. Now, when you want to get on the other side of the counter and be the producer, now we got a problem. Because you are messing up my economic apple cart. You're tipping my economic apple cart over. And I don't like it. You are one of those Negroes that want to own stuff. And this is problematic. Because if you start owning things like you did in the past, it's going to upset my economic apple cart and how I have my life set up. My life is set up for you to be the consumer. And that's why there's going to be a lot of Asian shops closing soon, because most of their consuming clientele is black women. All right? And so the Asian community needs to have a come to Jesus meeting, because what they don't realize is if they don't change the nature of how they treat black people, they're going to be shutting down across the United States. That's going to be in Forbes. That's going to be an article in Forbes. All right? So other people groups know that we are the consumer. They know this. So they have 100% of their disposable annual income, and they keep it mainly within their own communities. And then they also draw 98% of our disposable income comes from the pockets of black Americans. 98% of what we spend is spent outside of our communities. What would happen if black people just changed their spending habits? What would happen if even 40% of Black Americans decided to spend their money inside of the community? And some Blacks need to have professional training in how they treat Blacks so we can support them. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, as we close today, I want to thank you guys for these extra minutes. Got to stop on that note. We will continue this conversation next week. We're still on the doctrine of unequal exchange. We have a little bit more to read, but I know I'm way over time. I want to thank you for your time and attention. Hopefully, I've said something that will enlighten you as to the plight of Black Americans and Black people, not just Black Americans, but Black people around the world, and specifically Black Americans in this country. When my white brothers and sisters ask me, how can I help Black Americans? One of the main ways you can help Black Americans is begin to either become a angel investor. You can invest in Black owned businesses. You can buy Black owned products. You can support Black education. If you are in charge of a foundation, you can invite Black people in to come and teach. So there are ways that you can support Black Americans in this country. My white brothers and sisters for Labor Day, they are giving us the space of their 7 acres to hold a worship and prayer gathering for the turning of this nation. They're putting their money where their mouth is. They're not just talking about it, they're being about it. So there are ways and there are things that you can do to support and be an actual ally to Black people in this country. They are. If you are looking for resources on how to do that, you can go to whitenonsenseroundup.com. whitenonsenseroundup.com. There are a group of ladies out of Seattle, Washington that have put together a resource. There's resources on their page of all kinds of things where you can educate yourself, organizations that you can become a part of that are for the empowerment of Black people. Doesn't mean you're against the empowerment of other people. But right now, guess whose house is on fire on the block? If my house is on fire and your house is not, whose house needs the water hose? Mine. It would be foolish for you to call the fire department when my house is burning down and ask them to water your house. All right? Got it? Yes, and these are white women out of Seattle. That's whitenonsenseroundup.com. And you go to their resource section, and they have all sorts of resources on their page that will get you started in ways that you can learn and also ways that you can support Black people in this country. Because guess what? Our house is on fire. It is. And many Black people in this country act in different ways. They react in different ways to that house being on fire. Some of us are trying to build. Some of us are trying to teach and empower. Some of us are screaming. Some of us are yelling. Some of us are marching. But everybody has some sort of response. But the reality is, our house is on fire in this country. And so you can be a part of putting out the fire, or you can be the neighbor that watches the house burn and thinks that your house right next door is not going to be affected. We have people like that too in this country. So, this has been another episode of Daring Dialogues. I want to thank you for your time and attention. Remember, we will be broadcasting tomorrow evening as opposed to morning. We're looking at broadcasting between 5 and 6 p.m. is when I will come on. And remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So please go out today and be light. Thank you, thank you, thank you for hanging in with me today. God bless.